Imagine being a Nazi soldier on the Eastern Front.
You've survived Stalingrad. You've fought through brutal Russian winters. You've faced tanks, artillery, and endless waves of Soviet infantry. But nothing terrified you more than this. A woman, barely 20 years old, hiding in the snow, watching, waiting. And she never missed. The Germans had a name for them. They called them the Night Witches. And by the time the war was over, these women had collectively killed thousands of enemy soldiers, making them some of the most lethal fighters in all of World War II. This is their story. To understand who these women were, you first need to understand the world that created them. It's 1941. Nazi Germany has just launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. Over 3 million German soldiers pour across the Soviet border in a single day. The Soviet Union is caught completely off guard. Cities fall within days. Entire armies are surrounded and destroyed. Within months, the Germans are at the gates of Moscow itself. Stalin is desperate. The Soviet military is hemorrhaging men faster than they can be replaced. And so, for the first time in modern warfare, Stalin makes a decision that shocks the world. He opens the military, fully, to women. Not just as nurses or cooks. As fighter pilots, as tank crew, as snipers. Over 800,000 Soviet women would serve in combat roles during World War II, a number that has no equal in any other military in history. But among all of them, the snipers became legend. The Soviet sniper program was already one of the most sophisticated in the world. Unlike Western armies that focused on mass infantry charges, the Soviets had long understood the power of the single well-placed bullet. A skilled sniper doesn't just kill an enemy. They demoralize an entire unit. They make soldiers afraid to move, afraid to eat, afraid to sleep. One sniper can pin down hundreds of troops for days. And as it turned out, women were extraordinarily good at it. Training officers noticed something remarkable early on. Female recruits showed superior patience, superior stillness, superior ability to endure hours, sometimes days, of complete motionlessness in freezing conditions, waiting for the perfect shot. One Soviet general reportedly said, "Give me a regiment of women snipers over a regiment of men any day." They learned to control their breathing so completely that they could fire between heartbeats. Because even the slight tremor of a pulse could send a bullet inches off target at long range. They learned camouflage so advanced they could lie motionless in open fields for hours, completely invisible to the naked eye. And then they were sent to the front. Let me introduce you to some of them, because these were not statistics. These were real women, with real names, real lives, real stories. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was 24 years old when Germany invaded the Soviet Union. She was a history student at Kiev University. Quiet, bookish. The last person you'd look at and think, deadly. She had other ideas. When the invasion began, she walked into a recruitment office and asked to join the infantry. The officer laughed at her and suggested she become a nurse instead. She pulled out her marksmanship certificates and placed them on his desk. He stopped laughing. Within her first week at the front, she recorded her first 2 kills. It would not be her last. Pavlichenko fought in the brutal siege of Odessa, where Soviet forces were desperately outnumbered. Then she was transferred to Sevastopol, where some of the most savage fighting of the entire war took place. She developed tactics that were almost impossibly disciplined. She would arrive at a position before dawn, alone, settle into her camouflage, and wait. Hours would pass. She didn't move, didn't eat, sometimes didn't drink. She would take one shot, carefully chosen, perfectly placed. Then she would wait again. The Germans learned quickly that a Soviet sniper was operating in the area. They sent their own snipers to hunt her down. She killed 36 of them. In one engagement, a German sniper spent 3 days trying to locate and eliminate her. She spent 3 days hunting him back. On the 3rd day, she won. By the time she was wounded by a mortar explosion in 1942 and removed from combat, Lyudmila Pavlichenko had recorded 309 confirmed kills, making her the most successful female sniper in the history of warfare. The Soviet government sent her to the United States and Canada on a propaganda tour. She met President Franklin D. Roosevelt at the White House. American crowds went wild for her. One American reporter asked her whether Soviet women were allowed to wear makeup at the front. She looked at him calmly and replied, "There is no rule against it. But when you are lying in wait for the enemy for several days without moving, the mud and grime tend to spoil the effect." The crowd erupted. She returned to the Soviet Union, a national hero, completed her history degree, wrote her memoirs, and lived until 1974. Her face was printed on Soviet postage stamps. She was 58 years old when she died, beat, having outlived almost every man she ever fought alongside. If Pavlichenko was the most decorated, Roza Shanina was perhaps the most naturally gifted. She was born in 1924 in a small village in northern Russia. The 4th of 7 children. Her family was so poor, she walked 200 kilometers to the nearest city just to attend school. Shanina had a style that made German soldiers question their sanity. Most snipers fired from concealed static positions. Shanina preferred to move, to hunt. She would actively track German soldiers through rubble and forest. She called it going on the hunt. But what made her truly remarkable was her bravery under fire. In multiple recorded instances, Shanina deliberately exposed herself to enemy fire to draw attention away from wounded Soviet soldiers, allowing medics to reach them safely. Her diary, which she kept throughout her service, reveals a young woman deeply aware of her own mortality, deeply committed to the cause, and quietly terrified in the moments between battles. One entry reads, "I am afraid. I think everyone is afraid. The ones who say they are not afraid are lying or already dead." Roza Shanina was killed in action on January 28, 1945. She was 20 years old. The war ended 3 months later. Now, it's important to clarify something. The name Night Witches was actually given by the Germans to a specific regiment, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment. These were not snipers, but pilots. The 588th flew outdated biplanes, wood and canvas aircraft left over from the 1920s. So old and slow that the pilots had to turn off their engines, and glide silently over German positions to avoid being shot down. The Germans below would hear nothing, just a quiet whooshing sound in the darkness. And then bombs would fall. They said it sounded like a witch's broomstick sweeping across the sky. The name stuck. Over the course of the war, the 588th flew over 30,000 missions. Each pilot flew up to 15 missions per night. They dropped 3,000 tons of bombs. And they did it all in wooden biplanes against one of the most advanced air forces in the world. The psychological impact of female Soviet fighters on German troops cannot be overstated. German soldiers were raised in a culture that told them women were mothers, homemakers, certainly not warriors. And yet here, on the Eastern Front, women were killing them, outthinking them, outshooting them. Captured German soldiers spoke of a specific terror associated with Soviet female snipers. Not just the danger, but the humiliation. To be outsmarted and killed by a woman was, in their worldview, incomprehensible. Field reports from German units on the Eastern Front repeatedly noted the devastating effect of Soviet snipers on troop morale. Soldiers refused to leave their trenches. Officers were afraid to be seen giving orders. The simple act of lighting a cigarette at night became potentially fatal. And one German officer wrote in his personal diary, "We are more afraid of their women than their tanks." When the war ended in 1945, the Soviet Union had over 2,000 trained female snipers who had served at the front. Their combined confirmed kills numbered in the tens of thousands. And yet, history almost forgot them entirely. During the Cold War, Western histories of World War II largely ignored the Eastern Front. The stories of Soviet soldiers, male or female, were rarely told in English-speaking countries. For decades, women like Lyudmila Pavlichenko and Roza Shanina were known only in Russia. It wasn't until the 21st century, through books, documentaries, and films, that their stories began reaching global audiences. Today, Pavlichenko is recognized internationally as one of the greatest combat soldiers of World War II. Full stop. Not the greatest female soldier. One of the greatest soldiers. Period. It wasn't until the 21st century, through books, documentaries, and films, that their stories began reaching global audiences. Today, Pavlichenko is recognized internationally as one of the greatest combat soldiers of World War II. Full stop. Not the greatest female soldier. One of the greatest soldiers. History remembers its heroes selectively. For too long, these women were left out of the story. But the record is clear. The numbers don't lie. The German field reports don't lie. These women fought. They bled. They died. And they won. If this story moved you, share it. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. Subscribe for more untold chapters of military history every week. And leave a comment below. Which of these women do you find most remarkable? I'll see you in the next one.